Hello everyone, Prosperity here. The Legion is on our doorstep, and with its return we've had a lot of changes to our classes and specializations. In this series we're going to pick apart these changes to help you better understand what's going on. Welcome to the core combat overview for the Enhancement Shaman in Legion. This is the first of a two-part series for Enhancement. In this video we're going over the core spells, broken up into 4 parts: damage, utility, passives, and cooldowns. These are all of the abilities available to you through your core spellbook, and they form the basis for everything you'll be doing as an Enhancement Shaman. Let's start things off by going over your core damage spells. These 6 abilities, shown on screen here, are the bread and butter of your toolkit. The enhancement spec relies primarily on a new resource called Maelstrom that is built up and spent through your abilities. Learning how to use these spells effectively will go a long way when setting out on your journey to mastering enhancement. Crash Lightning is an instant ability that costs 20 Maelstrom and has a 6-second cooldown baseline. When used, all enemies in front of you within 8 yards will immediately take nature damage. If you hit 2 or more enemies with this spell, your Storm Strike and Lava Lash spells will deal additional nature damage to targets in front of you for the next 10 seconds. This is your primary AoE spell, but should be used even if you'll only hit 2 targets with it, but never just 1. You should try to have at least 80 Maelstrom when using this spell, as you'll want to get out as many Storm Strikes and Lava Lashes out as possible in the 10-second window. Flame Tongue is another instant ability, but this one has a 10-yard range and a 12-second cooldown and is completely free to cast. Hitting an enemy with this spell will deal fire damage to them and enhance your weapons for 16 seconds, granting all of your weapon attacks additional fire damage as well. The additional damage depends solely on your weapon speed, with slower weapons hitting harder than faster ones. This doesn't matter much in Legion though, as your weapon will be the same throughout the expansion. Lava Lash should be considered your filler Maelstrom spender. It's instant cast and costs 30 Maelstrom to use, dealing a sizable amount of fire damage to a target within melee range of you. This spell will be low on your priority list, but is useful for making sure Maelstrom isn't going to waste when your Storm Strike is on cooldown. Lightning Bolt is a pure filler spell, and for most players it will almost never see any use. It has a 40-yard range and is an instant cast to absolutely no cost to you, but should never be used unless you're outside the 10-yard range required for your Rockbiter spell and want to be pressing something. Rockbiter is your main source of Maelstrom generation. As previously stated, it has a 10-yard range and deals almost 5 times the damage of Lightning Bolt, with the added perk of generating 15 Maelstrom when used. If your brands aren't active, your Storm Strike is on cooldown, and you don't have enough Maelstrom to cast Lava Lash, you need to be using this spell. Storm Strike is the pinnacle of your spell priority. The spell costs a whole 40 Maelstrom to cast and has a baseline 16-second cooldown. When used, you will deal 3 times the damage of Lava Lash's physical damage to a target within melee range. Everything in your core ability set is geared around getting you the resources to cast this spell as much as possible. There is one exception to the rule of always keeping it on cooldown, and that's if you're setting up for AoE with your Crash Lightning spell. Now that we're through the damage abilities, let's take a look at your core utilities, shown on screen now. Learning how to use these 6 spells will be your next step towards greatness among the Shaman ranks. Cleanse Spirit costs a little bit of mana to use and has an 8-second cooldown. Using this spell on yourself or another friendly target will remove all curse effects from them. The spell isn't necessary all the time, but helping your healers to remove these effects can prevent a lot of damage from going out to your raid and could potentially save your life. Frostbrand is an instant spell that costs 20 Maelstrom. When used against an enemy, the target will take frost damage and your weapons will be enhanced for 16 seconds, causing every weapon attack to reduce a target's movement speed by 50% for 3 seconds. This ability has a 10-yard range and no cooldown, but should not be used frequently unless you've taken the Hailstorm talent, which I'll talk about in the next video. Healing Surge is your primary source of not dying. The spell has a 2-second cast time and costs mana baseline and heals for a pretty sizable amount. The interesting part of the spell is that using it when you have at least 20 Maelstrom will cause it to consume that Maelstrom to become instant cast. What this means is that if you have taken a lot of damage and can't hit anything, it's not a bad idea to pop one of these on yourself. Hex is your crowd control spell as a shaman. It has a 30-yard range, 30-second cooldown, and a 1.7-second cast time. You can only use it on humanoids and beasts, but getting a successful cast on them will incapacitate the target for 1 minute. Note that a Hex target will be freed as soon as it takes damage. Purge is very akin to Cleanse Spirit, except it's usable on enemies instead of allies. Using Purge on an enemy will remove 1 beneficial magic effect from them. This can also be used to reduce the amount of incoming damage to your team or keep the target from healing up, depending on the situation. Wind Shear is your interrupt spell. It has a 12-second cooldown and an incredible 30-yard range, and is castable off the global cooldown. When used, if the target is currently casting a spell, it will be interrupted and they will be unable to cast another spell of the same school for 3 seconds. Your priority with interrupts will mostly be to interrupt enemy healers in an encounter, or if there aren't any, to help interrupt important enemy spells. Now that we've gone through the utilities, let's move on to the core passives, shown on screen here. These abilities define how your abilities work together and give you some extra utility to bring to your gameplay. Maelstrom Weapon makes it so that your auto attacks and Wind Fury attacks generate 5 Maelstrom. This makes it so that you will always be generating your main resource as long as you're within melee range of your target. Wind Fury is another passive that we'll get into in just a minute. Your Mastery, Enhanced Elements, increases all fire, frost, and nature damage you deal by a baseline 16%, as well as increasing the proc chances for your Stormbringer and Wind Fury effects by 1/16 of your total Mastery percentage, increased by the Mastery stat found on your gear. This effect is very strong and basically makes it to where you can use Storm Strikes even more frequently. Reincarnation allows you to resurrect yourself once every 30 minutes with 20% health and mana. This effect does not count as a battle resurrection, so you should feel free to use this during raid encounters, but only if you believe your team will be able to finish off the boss as a result of your reincarnation. Otherwise, it's best to use this after you wipe to get your team resurrected quickly. Stormbringer is your first main hand passive, giving each main hand attack a 7% chance to reset your Storm Strike and cause it to cost half the normal Maelstrom cost and incur no cooldown. Because of this passive, you should try to stay at least 60 Maelstrom so that you can use 2 Storm Strikes back to back when this procs. Stormlash is a raid buff that gives your enhanced weapon attacks, aka Flame Tongue and Frostbrand, a chance to give 3 group members an 8-second buff that makes their attacks and spells deal additional nature damage. Needless to say, make sure you always have one of your 2 weapon enhancements applied to get the full effect from this passive. Wind Fury is your other main hand passive, giving your main hand attacks a 12% chance to deal 2 additional attacks. These attacks deal low damage, but one proc from this effect will give you 15 Maelstrom as opposed to 5 from a normal auto attack. With the passives through, let's take a look at the core cooldowns. These 4 abilities shown on screen here are the most powerful abilities in your arsenal and have both defensive and offensive applications. Astral Shift is a defensive ability with a 1.5 minute cooldown that causes you to take 40% less damage from all sources for 8 seconds. For encounters where there is constant incoming raid damage, this should be used as much as possible, but can be saved for times when you know there will be increased damage dealt to you. Feral Spirit is your main offensive cooldown. It has a 2-minute cooldown and upon activation summons 2 wolves to attack your enemies for 15 seconds, granting you 5 Maelstrom every time they attack. This ability should be used at the beginning of every boss fight, as soon as your weapons are enhanced and you're within melee range of the target. It's a good idea to use a Storm Strike as soon as you've used this cooldown, and try to use Lava Lash during this to balance yourself at around 80 Maelstrom. Heroism is your most important cooldown as a shaman as it affects your entire group. It has a 5-minute cooldown and when activated will increase the haste of all affected group members by 30% for 40 seconds. It's crucial to make sure you use this at the appropriate time during a fight because all affected members will be unable to gain the heroism effect again for 10 minutes. Spirit Walk is another sort of defensive ability on a 1-minute cooldown. Using this ability will remove all movement impairing effects from you and boost your movement speed by 60% for 8 seconds. This is incredibly useful for kiting, and you should also note that this is usable while in Ghost Wolf form, which will give you a total additional boost of 90%. Let's recap. Keep your weapon enhancements up at all times. Once your brands are up, use Feral Spirits to jumpstart your Maelstrom. Use Rockbiter to keep yourself at around 60 to 80 Maelstrom and spend it with Storm Strike or Lava Lash if Storm Strike is on cooldown. Always use Crash Lightning on 2 or more enemies with enough Maelstrom to get a Storm Strike off immediately, then resume building and spending Maelstrom as normal. If you're too far away to deal damage to anything with Rockbiter, use Lightning Bolt instead. Help your healers to remove curses when you can. Keep yourself alive with Healing Surge and Astral Shift. Use Ghost Wolf and Spirit Walk to keep yourself mobile. Remove damage buffs or healing from enemies with Purge, and work with the other interrupters in your group to make sure your Wind Shear uses don't go to waste. Wait for the appropriate times to use Heroism and Reincarnation if necessary. Following these rules will get you well on the way to mastering the enhancement spec. And that's all I have for the core combat overview for the Enhancement Shaman in Legion. Hopefully this video has helped to mold a solid foundation for you with the specialization. If you have any questions regarding enhancement or anything related to Legion, be sure to ask away in the comments below or on Twitter at @TheLoranzas. Don't forget to subscribe to keep an eye out for the next video for the Enhancement Shaman covering talents. Thanks for watching, and as always, have fun.